Wednesday. This is. It is. It is. It could have gone better.
It's quite nice to get out of Westminster.
You watched one. This morning went really well. Good. Really well. I've nominated you for something.
All right.
Is it possible to come forward? And also, you're aware of the significance of that?
Yes.
Yeah, I was wondering if you might maybe have a
No,
look
we
at...
just stopped.
Well, let's have a look at it.
Oh yeah, no, exactly, yeah.
You're pointing, Pat.
But if you
Can we go this? The darkest days.
That was on Mr. Churchill.
ladies and gentlemen, that's great, but if you come forward and try and make it natural. And action.
Mr. Churchill. Well, I think this is the irony of it.
Look at this anyway. We don't
learned nothing from.
There are no Dundee MPs. No, indeed.
We learn nothing from history.
No. In a word. In a word.
Very kind, thank you.
Yeah, all good. Where's Star? I can't.
When there are cameras outside, a few times a month, he'll come and give me as a matter of my hedge, which I don't maintain very well. Thank you. So I try to do this arch of the hedge. Sometimes if it's closed, I'll walk through it, so there's all this tree.
So it's the plural there.
And then the edge kicks off then. It's neither when I did a thing for Sky, I did the ridge a couple of times from after I grew, and someone, and I had these chintz curtains behind me, so someone tweeted out, why is he at his granny's?
Yeah.
Oh, it's cheeky. Can't win, can you?
So when you do that on the side, that's all right.
Oh, yeah.
You just make sure you can
Well, and the debris. What they usually do is the catwalks are some white.
Yeah, can we get them all down this line? Yeah. You okay?
What do you need from this, Nick? Oh, that's the story. Have you seen him? Way back at the back of the room.
So it's about persuading, but then you gotta the audio. So
yeah, and I could run a cable all the way up there. Just hang on. Hello. You're not. Are you not? Are you any use to me at all?
Huh?
Are you any use to me at all?
No.
Right. Okay.
I've heard that you've heard that I was. I'm no use to you ever. Yeah, you're going la.
No, it's just that it's going to be a problem for the cycles.
Yeah, I assume that's all. Where's your fourth and fifth BBC cameras here?
Yeah, what's
We've got 3 here. Sky cameras. It's an event and it's got a notch. I'm not sure where the notch is.
the falling strain, you know. Oh,
Well, I'm not meant to be working. Today was an admin day.
Yeah, you had one of those booked in.
and also delighted to be joined by MPs from across the House, from across the whole of the UK, and representing all parties. We're here today in the symbolic location of Church House to sign the Church House Declaration, which I'm delighted to announce has already attracted over 160 signatures of MPs in just the last 24 hours since it was launched, and we're making absolutely clear that we will stand forcibly against any attempt by Boris Johnson to prorogue Parliament, to gag our Parliament, and to stop the people's voice through its Parliament being heard. We will be having statements from the leaders and their representatives. We will then be signing the declaration just over there, and then we will be opening up to remarks from the other colleagues who joined us from across England and Scotland and Wales, and then there will be an opportunity for interviews at the back of the room. I'll hand over to Luciana.
Thank you so much. Well, we're all gathered here today. In fact, we shouldn't be in this room. We should be in Parliament. And there was over 150 members of Parliament that signed a letter to the Prime Minister saying that it should be recalled. And if not for the reasons of the countless announcements that we've heard of the Prime Minister saying that he's going to spend billions of pounds on various things, announcements about what will happen to EU nationals in this country come the 1st of November, various announcements that have been made to the press and not to Parliament, and particularly in the wake of the last week, where we've seen the Prime Minister have meetings with international leaders, meetings at the G7, and in normal circumstances, we'd be able to ask him questions, hold him to account, and his government to account also. We're not being afforded that opportunity, but we're gathered here today because he has not ruled out using prorogation as a tool with which to keep all of our in order to squash all of us. And ultimately, ours is a people's parliament. We are a parliamentary democracy, and on behalf of the millions of people that we are elected to represent, we're here today to tell the Prime Minister that he cannot pursue that path. He has no mandate to pursue a reckless no-deal Brexit, and that's why we're all here today. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to hand over now to the representatives and leaders of all the parties to share more broadly and widely why it is that we believe this, and afterwards we'll all have the opportunity to sign the Church House Declaration.
Thank you.
Can I thank Luciana and Stephen and all those others involved in this initiative? I think it's an important demonstration of how parliamentarians can come together and work on a cross-party basis to secure the basic right of having our voices heard in a democratic system. We've met this morning. Jeremy Corbyn, he's trapped in other meetings at the moment, but Jeremy Corbyn convened a meeting this morning of the opposition party leaders, and I think it was it's extremely positive and constructive meeting where we recognised, all of us recognised our responsibilities to prevent a no deal. One of the issues that we have to address, though, is to recognise, exactly as Luciana and Stephen has said, we're faced with a Prime Minister who, well, who recklessly is seeking to take us over the cliff of a no deal and all the consequences that has for people's jobs, their livelihoods, their standard of living, but also is willing to use a mechanism of proroguing Parliament to deny MPs their democratic rights to represent their constituents and determine the business of Parliament and determine the future direction of this policy. So we're here today to demonstrate right the way across the opposition parties and others that we will not tolerate such a manoeuvre, a reckless manoeuvre in itself. Yesterday, Shami Chakrabarti, as the Shadow Attorney General, published legal advice that many of you will have seen, which challenges the lawfulness of the attempt by the Prime Minister to prorogue Parliament. And I'm sure there'll be others who are looking at the legal aspects of that sort of dangerous tactic. Our view is, straightforwardly, is that Parliament should decide this matter. It should have the right to meet, and that's why many of us did support the recall of Parliament. Again, an initiative by Stephen and Luciana and others that I fully supported. But Parliament should have the right to meet. It should ensure that there's proper debate of the issue, and then Parliament should eventually decide. We're hoping, by the work that we're doing together, to ensure that we can achieve the most appropriate parliamentary mechanism to prevent a no deal and to ensure that, yes, the democratic wishes, we believe, of Parliament itself should be adhered to. I just give this warning to Boris Johnson. You know, Prime Ministers come and Prime Ministers go. But actually, I don't think we've ever seen a Prime Minister like this who has the potential to threaten the very nature of our democracy. And I just warn him that we will not stand aside and let that happen. And exactly as the Declaration says, we'll use whatever mechanism necessary to prevent that happening, to secure the democratic rights of our constituents to be heard through their MPs, but also to secure the future of our country against such a reckless act. Solidarity.
Let me also thank Luciana and Stephen for all they've done over the course of the last few weeks. A tremendous amount of effort has gone in to make sure that this event takes place today, and it's a fantastic demonstration of the will of parliamentarians that we are simply not going to stand back and allow Boris Johnson, without a mandate, in an undemocratic manner, drive the United Kingdom off the cliff edge to do enormous damage to our communities, when we know that there is no such thing as a good Brexit, when we know that a no-deal Brexit will have catastrophic consequences for our economy, for our communities. And you know, there is that sense of responsibility that we all have. We have to be honest with the people of the United Kingdom, that we face an enormous challenge, that the default position is that we leave the European Union on a no-deal basis at the end of October. And I have to say to you, as colleagues and as friends, I'm proud of what happened this morning, because all of us as opposition parties laid our differences at the door, because we recognise the scale of the challenge that collectively that we face. And woe betide anyone that doesn't work in a collective fashion, because we face what is a significant challenge over the course of the next few weeks. What we have in the government of the UK is an administration that is prepared to stop at nothing to take us out of the European Union without a mandate, with a Prime Minister that was put in place by Conservative members of Parliament. A Conservative government that's been taken over by a clique that is driven by ideology, that is simply not prepared to accept the damaging consequences of what Brexit is going to do. They are prepared to shut down Parliament. They are prepared to take away the rights of parliamentarians. We must stand together. We are in for the fight of our lives. And that unity that we have in the opposition parties, and yes, with colleagues on the Conservative benches as well, that recognises what is going on, gives us the opportunity to stop Boris Johnson in his tracks. You know, when you consider that the government's own analysis indicates that a no-deal Brexit would have an impact on the economy that's 4 times the scale of the impact of the financial crisis, then that is sobering. When the government has admitted that it's going to imperil the supply of food and medicines, and indeed in the document that was released through the Sunday Times last week, that hundreds of thousands of people run the risk of having difficulties with their water supply. Friends, this is a government that is threatening the security of our citizens. We should be under no illusion of the scale of the challenge that we face. Working together, we can stop this. We can find a safe landing place. Working together, we will win, and we will get to a situation that all of us as MPs protect the economic, the social, and the cultural interests of our citizens. And we will simply not allow Boris Johnson to take away our democratic rights. Thank you.
Thank you, first of all, to Luciana and to Stephen for coordinating this declaration and bringing us together today here in this historic building. And thank you to all of the members of Parliament who have come here from all corners of Britain to make the point clearly that Parliament will not stand by while the Prime Minister sends our country into a catastrophic no-deal Brexit and takes away the rights of people to have their voices heard. We know that the no deal that the government is heading towards is in itself anti-democratic. There is no mandate in our country for a no-deal Brexit. It was not on offer in 2016. And to make it even worse, the Prime Minister now threatens to silence Parliament, the place where people have their voices heard. And the job that we all do to represent our constituents is important to give voice to them. To my constituent, a doctor who came to my advice surgery because he was worried about the government's no-deal planning for his area of nuclear medicine and what that would mean for the number of cancer screening and treatments that could be provided. For the people who are concerned, having looked at the government's own analysis of what no deal means, that they are concerned about shortages of food in the supermarkets, they're concerned about whether they can get their prescriptions filled. And although we are here from Scotland, England and Wales today, it is also important that the people in Northern Ireland have a voice. And I think about my visit just a fortnight ago, listening to a young woman at the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland talking to me about how she remembered her sisters telling her that when they went to school, their school bags had to be searched at the checkpoints. She grew up in a Northern Ireland that didn't have that because she grew up in a climate of peace. But the fear in that community, and in particular in those border communities, is palpable. They aren't making it up. They are genuinely worried about what might happen, particularly if we crash out without a deal. And so it is more important than ever that those voices from right across the United Kingdom, our brilliant, strong, United Kingdom together, are heard and heard loudly. And we collectively will not stand by. We will make sure we give voice to the people. Thank you.
And I, too, very much like to extend my thanks to Stephen and to Luciana for this event today. And, of course, we are in Church House, and the benches of the House of Commons stand empty. They are effectively little more than a tourist attraction at present, and that could well be a glimpse of the future of how effective they might be, the reality of our politics. Now, Leave campaigners in 2016, they appealed to the hearts of voters by arguing that EU membership ran contrary to the British constitutional tradition of parliamentary sovereignty. Our current Prime Minister was among those who argued that the authority of Parliament can only be restored if the UK left the European Union, despite the endless contradictions of his own arguments. And of course, many of us had already seen through the duplicity of his arguments 3 years ago, as European Union membership never reduced sovereignty, but rather allowed us to pool sovereignty in areas which best serve the people that we represent. However, few of us imagined that that very same man who argued that Brexit would somehow give Parliament more authority would 3 years later be actively seeking to close it down in order to force through the most destructive policy in recent history. Now, as a party, Plaid Cymru do not see the House of Commons as our natural permanent home. We have dedicated our energies towards creating our own national parliament, more modern, more inclusive, more representative than Westminster, a parliament that can truly empower the people it represents. But we also have a duty to the people of Wales to put public interest before party interest in this time and in this place. And in this instance, that means protecting representative democracy against an attempted, undemocratic, executive elite coup d'etat. And I see no exaggeration in calling it out for what it is. Now, faced with what could be the most serious abuse of power on parliamentary democracy in living memory, we must do everything we can to stop the crash-out scenario that will happen if we don't stop Article 50 from being concluded on November the 1st. For that, we need to put the conventions of politics as we are used to, we need to put them to one side. We need to put egos and petty rivalries to one side. This is not politics as usual. We are dealing with the greatest emergency of all our political careers. More than that, the greatest emergency of the communities which we represent. We need a new politics to respond to that sort of urgency. Now, to close, I am proud to say that Plaid Cymru and the Greens and the Liberal Democrats have already started this grown-up approach to politics during the Brecon and Radnorshire by-election. Now there is an opportunity for all of us in this room to build on that spirit of cooperation and do everything we can to protect democracy. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thank you very much, Luciana and Stephen, for organising this event. And I don't want anybody to think that after a great, and it was a really good meeting this morning, that as a result of that I was taken unwell. But that's why I was late, because I've not been very well. Ian knows all about it, and we don't want to go into the details. Thank you. I think, in all seriousness, the last time I sat in this room, or was in this room, was shortly after the referendum campaign. And it was a group of business people that had gathered here for whatever reason it might have been. The referendum had taken place, and we knew we were leaving the European Union. And every single person in this room, whatever their views about the decision that had been made in the referendum, all agreed that the next stage would be how we left the European Union and the sort of deal that we would get to do the least amount of harm to our economy, to our peace and security and so on and so forth. There is no debate about that. And as I look around this room at my colleagues, I know, and I think the majority, overwhelmingly, the majority of us genuinely believed we could find a way coming together to deliver the best thing for the country. And as we now know, the one thing that never happened was that there was never any reach out from the party that I used to be a member of to reach out to build a consensus on how we were going to deliver the referendum result. The will was there, but the means were never put in place. And credit to Jeremy Corbyn, because he called us in today and we had that meeting and we put aside our differences in our determination, as others have said, to stop this country crashing out without a deal, which would be so calamitous, a disaster, as Greg Clark called it. But also, as I think it was Joe and others, of course, have identified, was the one thing, the one promise perhaps, that we could think that they might have kept, the Leave leaders, when they said we would not leave the European Union without a deal. So that now is what unites us, and also our determination to make sure that Parliament, which apparently is going to become more sovereign if we leave the European Union. And I thought it was all about regaining the sovereignty, which actually, in truth, we never lost, but let's rerun the referendum campaign. And it is profoundly ironic that in order to deliver something that I genuinely believe the vast majority of Leave voters never voted for, Boris Johnson, and make no mistake about this, as others have said, he and his unelected advisors, ideologically driven, will stop at nothing to do what he says he is determined to do. And as we all know, the consequences, as I say, the at least 8% drop in the future growth and prosperity of our country. And I just finally wanted to say this. When the history books are written, it might just record this coming together and our determination to make sure that our sovereign parliament continues to meet and to discuss and debate and scrutinise on the biggest issue that our country has faced since the Second World War. But history will also record this. There were those who acted with courage, and there were those who just sat and did absolutely nothing. And you all know who the people of courage have been, and those who have failed to exercise their courage, who will stop you in the corridors in Parliament and say, well, of course I agree with you. I mean, this is absolute madness. It's dreadful. But they will not go and do the right thing, which is to be true to their principles and beliefs, do the right thing for their country and the right thing for their constituents. And my fear is that too many of them would be quite happy to see Parliament suspended and not brought back, because they can carry on not showing the courage. And each and every one of us knows somebody who voted against what they actually believe in. And that is a terrible indictment of where we've got to. So what we say is, to pinch an expression, forgive me, Luciana, enough is enough. We will not let this happen. We will work together. Our Parliament will meet. We will represent our constituents and our country. We are accountable to the people that brought us here, and they have a right for their voice to be heard as we face this awful crash-out disaster, which we will not allow to happen.
I just want to add my thanks to the others who've expressed their thanks to Stephen and Luciana for bringing us together for this incredibly important moment, I think. And I'm delighted on behalf of the Greens to be supporting this declaration, to be joining the MPs in this room, to be joining MPs from right across the United Kingdom, who together have come together, because we do recognise we are at a moment of national emergency. At this time of national emergency, MPs should be able to hold to account an increasingly reckless Prime Minister. Let's not forget that since his election as Prime Minister, Johnson has been subject to about, I think, 3 hours of scrutiny so far by MPs, just on the last day of Parliament before the summer recess. And yet he's putting his foot on the accelerator and driving the country off the cliff edge as if he had a huge mandate and as if he had overwhelming support. So let me just repeat again that he has no mandate for the no-deal Brexit that he is pursuing. The government has a majority of precisely one, a Prime Minister elected with 0.1% of the population, yet making the biggest decision since the Second World War, and MPs are supposed to be happy to be off the pitch, to be absent. Well, we are not going to stand for that, and today is a coming together of all parties to say that we will make sure that Parliament does its job and holds this increasingly reckless executive to account. And when people raise with us the issue of democracy, I think we need to be very, very clear that this vicious form of Brexit that is being pursued was actually dismissed both by him and by other prominent leavers during the referendum campaign. Now, Mr. Gove himself, now in charge of no-deal preparations, as recently as March said, and I quote, "We didn't vote to leave without a deal. That wasn't the message of the campaign I helped to lead." Well, quite so, and I think we might just remind Mr. Gove of his words then. I want to mention quickly Operation Yellowhammer that others have touched upon, because it does strike me when we read this whole list of suffering, frankly, that is going to happen as a result of a no-deal Brexit. And remember, this is the government's own estimation of what's going to happen. And as Philip Hammond has made perfectly clear, this is not some document that was, written months ago. This is a current document. It just strikes me that if these harms were happening through any other cause, whether it to be due to strikes or due to some kind of foreign powers, we would have parliamentarians recalled in an instant. And yet, because it's some kind of self-imposed damage we're expected to just go along with it. Well, on behalf of our constituents, we will not do that. I think we are here to say that MPs will reaffirm the principle of democracy in which the legislature can and must rein in an executive that is lurching out of control. The Prime Minister is one who is trying to subvert Parliament and bypass the democratic process, deliberately working to exclude the people's representatives from a decision of such overwhelming importance. And the news earlier this week that the government has sought advice from the Attorney General about suspending Parliament for around a month just adds to this sense of mounting outrage and mounting constitutional crisis. So I'm glad to be joining MPs, as I say, from around the country, around the UK, all the countries of the UK, saying that we as Parliament will do everything in our power to stop this. We will stand up for the people. I am proud to be part of a People's Parliament who will oppose this, and I am proud to be part of those who will block what is nothing less than a coup. Thank you.
Well, can I thank all the leaders and their representatives for extraordinary words, I think, for extraordinary times and in a very unique location, as has been said. And those of you who have a time to spend afterwards, you may want to look at the remarks about Churchill and the holding of the House of Commons in this very room during the Second World War. We're going to ask the leaders and the representatives to come down and be the first to sign the declaration in person. Luciana and I will also be tweeting out the list of the signatories as of 3 o'clock, which is well over 160 signed in just since the declaration went out at 10 o'clock last night, with more signing all the time and from all parties, including Conservatives, including DUP. So I'll ask the leaders and representatives to head down here and they're going to sign the declaration, and then we'll invite up the other members of Parliament to sign before some further remarks.
Well done, Steve.
Steps.
Paul Cameron, do you mind nipping in there? Sorry.
Yes. I went home. I went to bed. I fell asleep. Right then, come on then, gang.
Let's all go back.
Sorry.
Stiff. Right.
Live full camera.
Guys, if you could turn and look at us as you sign things. Okay. Okay, thank you. Everyone look at the
Liz, do you want?
Joe, come on, Tony, please.
That's right. We're good.
On here, please, again. Thank you.
Got one?
Sorry, lady with the microphone. Lady, the other.
Sorry.
Come on. Keir Starmer sign.
I only got this first.
And all the leaders. All the leaders sign that. Luciana and I.
Guys, here. Please turn. Please turn as you sign, please.
What about Keir? Come on. Come up. Okay.
Please, Keir.
And then if you want to bring the other MPs
Others
come through.
Yeah, other MPs. Ben.
Who's the next?
Yeah. You shouldn't kiss me. Good to know. Yeah. Come on in, guys.
Tom, just turn around.
Chris Madison from Leicester.
I'm the only one who put MP Hello.
We've got Rachel Maskell from York. Every corner of England, Wales and Scotland.
Look around there, turn around this way. Alright?
Kevin Brennan from Cardiff West. Got Madeline Moon from Bridgend.
This is for the 1,700 Ford workers who've lost their jobs because of this government.
Do you think we can do it on stage with
We can potentially go there, but some people have gone off already. So John Woodcott from Barron Furness. Heidi Allen.
This is what Unite to Remain is all about. We're working together in ways that parties have never ever done before, and we're going to stop this.
And Lloyd Russellmore from Brighton Kent Town. Get this right. We've got Louise Salmon from Liverpool Riverside. Annalise Dodds from Oxford East. Helen Hayes. Angela Smith, Headstone Stocksbridge.
Okay. Real fair.
Got Lambos, Charlambos. And we've got Kate Green coming up.
Well, look this way.
Got Howard Williams from Arafat. Anyone else to cite?
Excuse me.
Thank you. Got Gareth Thomas from Harrow. Janet David.
Just going to cross over in front of you, is that right?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, no worries.
We just need sweet tag for the rest of this. You're right to hold this.
Well done. Just turn to us with the wave cameras
Oh,
here.
sorry.
They're following. Brilliant. Very fun. Thank you.
All right.
We're different parties, but we're united.
Of course we can. We'll jump, go on, jump in.
Where's the space?
The space is here.
Okay. It's like a pulse check.
You smelled in all the right places.
Right,
there you go. Should we all jump? We're going to go jump in together.
We're going to go together.
Do you mind taking one in?
Yeah.
I'll swap.
But you have to hold this, yeah.
So we have to.
Look at Tom, everybody.
Yeah.
Patrick. It's all right.
Tom, can you get a wee picture of me, can't you?
Hang on,
I have.
Just hold your pen against it.
Or like, sort of like Top of the Pops. When they used to mouth the words. Said great Aunt Joanna.
Cycle for Joanne.
Perfect.
Go. Who's next?
Well, I've already signed, but I just need to get me 4 minutes time. You ready, Rosie?
Historic signing.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Well, to what I've heard, I think
They just must have been
Yeah, he's very good now.
Right, you've been invited to their conference.